The house goes on the market in 6 weeks. I have already spoken to someone at Royal LePage. This is not up for debate, Mum. He said it the way a manager delivers a staffing decision. Final, considered, issued from a position of assumed authority. Griffin was standing in my kitchen, back against the counter I had installed myself 2 summers after his father passed, coffee mug in hand. Kendall sat at the table behind him, turning a spoon in slow, private circles without lifting her eyes. I had been upstairs in my study when I heard him. Tuesday morning, January. I had been going over the annual property tax statement, a habit from 31 years managing a credit union branch, the kind of habit that does not dissolve just because you have retired. Before I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard his voice, low and clipped and certain. He was on the phone. He ended the call when I stepped through the doorway, set the phone face down on the counter, and looked at me without apology. "We have been looking at a 2-bedroom unit," he continued. "A building in Stony Creek. New construction. Very manageable for someone at your stage of life. You would free up the equity and still come out with enough for a comfortable income stream. 65 years old. That was how old I was. Not 90, not struggling. 65 with a full credit union pension, a clean TFSA, no debts, and a mind that had reviewed thousands of loan applications and flagged discrepancies that 3 other people had missed. I was not at any stage of life that required managing. And yet here I was, being allocated a unit in Stony Creek like an item on a balance sheet, being moved to a more convenient column. I looked at Kendall. Our eyes met for just a moment. Long enough for me to see something there, a flicker of what might have been remorse or uncertainty, and then she looked down again. The spoon made its circles. She said nothing. I did not argue. I do not argue when arguing is useless. I turned around, walked to the entrance, put on my coat, and picked up my car keys from the ceramic bowl by the door, cold in my hand, solid. I had packed an overnight bag 2 months earlier and left it on the closet shelf without fully acknowledging to myself why. I took it now and stepped outside into the January cold and pulled the door shut quietly behind me. The house had been mine for 29 years. My husband and I had purchased it in the spring of 1996, when the elm trees on the street were still young enough to bend in a wind. He died 11 years ago, and sole ownership transferred to me automatically under right of survivorship, registered cleanly at the Land Registry Office. I had paid off the mortgage 4 years before Griffin arrived with 2 vehicles worth of belongings and a story about the landscaping business failing. 3 years ago, that was. 3 years of keeping the hydro on. 3 years of paying the property taxes, the insurance, the internet, the gas. 3 years of covering the groceries through the joint credit union account I had added Kendall to so she would not have to ask me every week. 3 years of listening to Griffin explain, with great sincerity and changing details, that things were almost sorted, almost turning around, a contract almost finalized, an investor almost committed. And 3 years of making myself smaller in my own house, moving my reading chair from its window corner when Kendall needed the space for her yoga mat, taking the television downstairs to my study when Griffin decided the living room sound system needed repositioning, eating dinner at 6 instead of 7 because that was when the kitchen was available to me without interruption. Small adjustments, one at a time, the kind that seem reasonable in isolation and feels like a slow disappearance only when you look at them all together. The hotel I chose was on the edge of the escarpment, quiet, unassuming. I checked in, carried my bag upstairs, and sat at the small desk by the window without turning on the lamp. Outside, the city lights came on one by one as the sky darkened. Inside, the room asked nothing of me. From the inner pocket of the bag, I took the folder I had retrieved from the false bottom of my filing cabinet that morning. Before coming downstairs, before any of it. Title deed, Land Registry records. Property tax confirmations going back 7 years. Each document bearing my name, Lucille Adair, at the top, clearly and correctly. I had worked in financial services for 31 years. I had watched families ruin themselves over documents they had not read carefully enough. I had kept my own in order the way some people keep emergency supplies. not expecting the emergency, but not unprepared for it either. I read through each page slowly. My name had not changed. The ownership had not shifted. Not when my husband died. Not when Griffin moved in. Not when I added Kendall to the checking account, or kept the lights on for 3 winters, or chose not to ask questions I sensed would not be answered honestly. It had never stopped being mine. He had simply made me forget to act like it. I poured a glass of water and sat back at the desk. Then I opened my phone and scrolled to a name I had not dialed in several years. Carlton Muse, property and estates lawyer. We had been professional neighbors for more than a decade during my years at the credit union branch on King Street, our offices sharing the same building. We had referred clients and members to each other across the hall, without much social exchange beyond trust and the occasional coffee standing in the corridor. He was precise and calm, and he had never given me bad advice. He answered on the 3rd ring, Lucille. His voice was careful with concern. Is everything all right? It will be, I said, but I need your advice tomorrow morning. Tell me what happened. I told him, clearly, without dramatics. My son informed me this morning that he intends to list my property without my consent. He has been living in my home for 3 years without a lease or any formal agreement. I have paid every expense associated with that house. I left this evening. I am at a hotel. I would like to understand my options and have the process begin as quickly as possible. Carlton was quiet for a moment. The house is registered solely in your name? Yes. He has no power of attorney, no cosigner relationship, no financial stake in the property. Nothing. Then you are not asking whether you have standing, Carlton said. You have it. You are asking how to exercise it properly so that nothing can be challenged later. Exactly. He walked me through it deliberately. Griffin and Kendall were occupants by consent. A status distinct from tenant status under Ontario's Residential Tenancies Act, particularly in circumstances where the occupancy involves family members and no lease was ever signed. Consent could be formally withdrawn with written notice. 60 days was reasonable. He would prepare the notice and have it served by an associate, not by me, so there could be no allegation of personal conflict or coercion. One more thing, Carlton added before we ended the call. Tonight, review your banking access. Any account he can reach through you, look at it carefully, and put the appropriate safeguards in place. When people realize a situation is changing, they sometimes act before they think clearly. He had the instincts of someone who had watched the same patterns for many years. I stayed up until past midnight reviewing accounts. I set a transfer limit on the joint account Kendall used for groceries. I added a notification requirement on any outgoing transfer above $50. I drafted a written request to the credit union to close the supplementary card linked to Griffin's wallet. I was methodical and unhurried about it. 31 years of financial review had given me the kind of patience that is not passive. It is precise. The notice was served at 9:15 the following morning. I was at breakfast in the hotel dining room when Kendall called. Lucille. Her voice was quiet, controlled over something considerably less controlled beneath it. There is a man at the door. He is asking for you by name. He says it is legal business. Is Griffin there? He is. She paused. He is asking questions. Accept the papers, I said. Tell Griffin the man is doing his job. Read the document before you let Griffin read it. What is happening? What should have happened some time ago? I am sorry it is a surprise. The background noise on her end rose suddenly, Griffin's voice, sharp and disoriented, demanding to know who was at the door, why there was a stranger in his house. Kendall said something low and indistinct. A door closed. Then her voice, reading. It says 60 days. Yes. To vacate. Yes. But Lucille, that is correct. All of it is correct. She ended the call. I refilled my coffee. 23 minutes later, my phone buzzed twice. Credit union notification. An attempted transfer of $3,800 from the joint account to an external account I did not recognize. Registered under a numbered company. The transfer had been blocked by the limit I had set the night before. I texted Carlton. He tried to move money this morning. Failed. External account, numbered company. His reply came quickly. Keep that notification. He is scared. Scared people do impulsive things. By noon, Griffin had called me 4 times. The voicemails moved through several registers, anger, then a studied reasonableness, then anger again, and finally a quiet, calibrated tone he had always used when he wanted me to believe he had been thinking clearly all along. Mum, I think we have had a misunderstanding. Can we just talk? I sent a text instead of calling back. There is no misunderstanding. We will speak through Carlton's office. He called again immediately. I answered this time. What are you doing? His voice had dropped the performance. What do you think this accomplishes? I would like you to tell me something, I said. In 3 years of living in my house, what financial contribution have you made? Mum. A number, Griffin. Any number. Silence. I would also like you to explain what happened to the business. Not the version you gave me when you arrived. The actual version. The business failed, you know that. I know you told me that, I said. I also know that provincial business filings are part of the public record. I have spent part of this morning looking at yours. The silence this time was longer, more careful. Bring the financial documents to the meeting on Thursday, I said. Carlton's office. 10 o'clock. He hung up without replying. The meeting room had a long table and a window that faced west. I arrived early and sat at the far end. Carlton had already laid out water and folders and a second copy of the occupancy notice. He said nothing when I sat down except, "Good. You look steady." "I am," I said. Griffin and Kendall arrived 8 minutes late. Griffin came through the door moving too fast for the room, shoulders tight, tie already loosened. Kendall followed 2 steps behind. She sat without taking her coat off. "We are doing this under protest," Griffin said before he had fully sat down. "Family matters do not belong in lawyers' offices." "Sit down, Griffin," I said. He sat. Carlton walked through the file without rushing. The title registration. The occupancy notice, valid and properly served. The letter sent to Royal LePage, clarifying that no listing authority existed, and that any attempt to proceed without the registered owner's documented, notarized consent would be addressed through the Law Society of Ontario. LEAP. Griffin interrupted twice. Carlton allowed him to finish both times and then continued exactly where he had left off. When Carlton addressed the attempted account transfer, naming the amount, the numbered company, the timestamp, Kendall turned to look at Griffin for the first time since they had sat down. "What account is that?" Griffin did not answer her. Carlton placed a document in front of Kendall. "This is a summary of the financial obligations registered against Griffin's former business number, drawn from public records and credit bureau filings." She read slowly. She read it twice. I watched her face as she reached the bottom of the page and then went back to the top again as though she wanted to be certain she had not misread something. I placed 3 more documents in the center of the table. The actual provincial filings from the landscaping company, cross-referenced against what Griffin had told me when he arrived 3 years ago. The business was failing for 18 months before the period you described as the collapse, I said. The losses predate the circumstances you gave me. I have also pulled the personal credit history. 2 lines of credit in default. A collections notice from a financial firm in Mississauga. The equity from selling my house would have covered most of this. You would have come out with enough to start again. I would have been placed in a unit in Stony Creek and told it was for my benefit. Mum, I was going to. You needed the house, I said, not to help me, to pay this. Kendall set the papers down very gently, the way you set something down when you are afraid of what your hands might do otherwise. She did not look at Griffin again after that moment. I stood. My knees ached in the way they do in January, but I stood straight. The terms are in the notice, I said. 60 days. I will collect my personal effects and the contents of my study on day 1, and I expect no interference with that visit. Utilities remain in my name, and I will pay them directly through the end of the period. After day 60, nothing in that house has Griffin's name connected to it in any form. I looked at Kendall. Carlton can refer you to a family lawyer if you would like to speak to someone independently. That offer is genuine, and it has nothing to do with anything else in this room. She nodded. It was barely visible, but it was clear. Griffin said nothing. He was looking at the provincial filing on the table in front of him. He looked, for the first time in 3 years, like a man who had run completely out of almost. I walked out of the conference room and took the stairs. The 60 days passed the way January and February always do in Hamilton, gray and deliberate, and occasionally lit from within by something small and honest. I stayed with a former colleague in Ancaster who had a spare room and preferred evenings the way I preferred them. Quiet, the radio on low, bed before 10. It suited me completely. Carlton sent brief updates. Griffin had consulted a paralegal who confirmed, after 2 meetings, that there were no legal grounds to contest a valid occupancy notice on property he had never owned. The file had been closed. Royal LePage confirmed no listing had been initiated or pursued. The credit union had formally noted the attempted transfer in my account file. Kendall called in the 5th week from a number I did not recognize. Her own, she explained, not the family plan. She was in Brantford with her sister. She had an appointment with a family lawyer the following week. She said she had not known the full extent of the financial picture, and I believed her. It is possible to share a life with someone and only be shown the version of the story they have decided you are allowed to see. I did not know, she said. I want you to understand that. I know, I said. I could see it in the kitchen that morning. You did not know what to do either. She was quiet. I am sorry I did not say anything. I thought about the spoon, the slow circles, the way her eyes had found mine for just a moment before she looked away. I had done my own version of the same thing for 2 full years before I finally left, so I was not in any position to judge her harshly. We both took longer than we needed to, I said. That part is behind us now. The day the 60 days ended, I parked at the corner and watched the moving truck pull away from the house. I gave it an hour. Then I drove up, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house breathed differently. Not emptier. Most of what was in it had always been mine. But lighter, the way a room is lighter when it no longer has to hold someone else's tension. The sitting room walls showed pale rectangles where Griffin's equipment had been mounted. The spare bedroom was a spare bedroom again. The kitchen smelled of cleaning spray, and underneath that, the particular smell of the house itself, which I had stopped noticing years ago. I opened every window for a quarter of an hour, then I put the kettle on. The painting took 3 days. Sage green for the sitting room, the color of light when it has nowhere urgent to be. I rehung the photographs I had taken down to make room for a print Kendall had wanted on the wall. I moved my reading chair back to the corner by the window. I shifted the kitchen table 2 feet to the left to where it had stood before Griffin decided it made more sense against the wall. The Saturday after I moved back, the woman 3 doors down appeared at the door with a pan of butter tarts and an expression that required no explanation. She came in. We had tea. The week after that, she brought her sister, and then a friend, and then another. It became something without a formal name, those Saturday afternoons. Women who had lived long enough to know that something in their arrangement had shifted without their choosing, who could not always say precisely when the shifting had begun or what exactly had been lost. A woman whose son wanted his name added to the deed for estate planning purposes. A woman whose daughter now managed all the household accounts. A woman who laughed when she said she hadn't bought her own groceries alone in 4 years and then went quiet when she realized she wasn't laughing anymore. I did not tell them what to do. I told them what I knew. Your name on that deed is your voice. While you are alive, what is yours stays in your name. A will handles what comes after. Love does not require you to sign anything over before you are ready, and anyone who insists otherwise is asking you to trade your voice for their convenience. If they love you, they will wait. Some of them wrote things down. One of them told me, 3 Saturdays later, that she had made an appointment with a property lawyer and had felt, For the first time in longer than she could precisely say, like a person with plans of her own. That felt like enough. Kendall called once more in April. She had a lease on an apartment in Burlington, a new position with a property management firm, and a voice that sounded like it had somewhere it was going. We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things, the weather, her commute, a book she had started, and said goodbye without any of the weight that used to live between us. Griffin did not call. That was his choice to make. The door between us is not closed. It is locked. He has always known where to find me, and when he is ready to knock without an agenda, I will answer. What I know now, at 65, sitting in my own house with the evening light settling across sage green walls. There is a particular kind of invisibility that comes from choosing patience so often and for so long that you forget you had a choice. I had called it love. I had called it grace. But grace that asks nothing of the other person has a way of becoming permission for those who have stopped noticing they are taking something. The moment I said no, clearly, in writing, in the proper form, with my name on the correct documents, everything became visible again. Who was using me? Who was frightened of me? Who had been waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for someone to show them the door they were allowed to walk through themselves. You do not need to reach the point I reached. You do not need to wait until someone else is making decisions about your home from inside your kitchen. You are allowed to name what is yours. You are allowed to take up your own space, in your own chair, in your own house, at whatever hour and volume you choose. I am watching from Hamilton, Ontario. The reading chair is in its corner. The kettle has just gone quiet, and the house is mine in every room in which it always was.